The Galactic Survey Commission had a simple job: catalogue worlds, rate their hospitability, and slap a classification on them so nobody accidentally colonized a planet that would immediately kill them. For 3,000 cycles, this system worked flawlessly. Then Kepler 442b happened. The planet sat in the Cygnus constellation, approximately 1,200 light-years from Earth, which might as well have been next door in galactic terms. On paper, it looked promising, rocky, terrestrial, sitting smugly in the habitable zone of its orange dwarf star. The kind of place that made planetary scouts salivate. Then they actually sent probes. The first probe lasted 4 hours before atmospheric pressure variations crushed it like a tin can at a recycling festival. The second probe, reinforced and expensive, managed 6 hours before the local wildlife, a charming serpentine creature with acid saliva and a grudge against technology, dissolved its outer hull. The third probe was retrieved after 2 days, but only because they'd installed a panic button and it had been pressed so many times, the researchers worried it might have achieved sentience and developed anxiety. After extensive analysis, committee meetings, and one memorable incident where a Velcrin delegate fainted while reviewing the atmospheric composition data, Kepler 442b received its official designation, Class-9 Uninhabitable, with a footnote suggesting that even thinking about landing there violated several workplace safety regulations. The report was filed. The planet was marked with the galactic equivalent of hazard tape and skull emojis. Everyone agreed to forget it existed. Then the Perseverance 3 had to go and crash there. The colony ship had been en route to New Horizon, a perfectly reasonable Class 2 paradise world with beaches and minimal man-eating flora. But hyperspace calculations are tricky, solar flares are unpredictable, and sometimes the universe just decides to ruin your whole decade. The ship dropped out of hyperspace directly into Kepler 442b's gravity well, which was astronomically improbable and catastrophically inconvenient. The crash was not survivable. This was not speculation. The Galactic Survey Commission ran the numbers 3 times. Hull breach, unsurvivable atmospheric entry, impact velocity that turned metal into abstract art. The ship's black box transmitted for exactly 4 minutes before going silent, and even that felt generous given the circumstances. 2 weeks later, a monitoring satellite picked up a heat signature that looked suspiciously like controlled fire. Commander Theksin of the Orbital Survey Station Vigilance stared at the readings with the expression of someone whose carefully organized universe had just been vandalized. Theksin was a Porvali, a species known for their methodical nature and profound discomfort with chaos. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a nervous habit his subordinates had learned meant something was very wrong. "Run it again," he said. The technician, a young Velcrin named Ossic, with more enthusiasm than sense, nodded eagerly. "Already did, Commander. 3 times. That's definitely a campfire. Temperature consistency, smoke composition, the fuel source appears to be local wood. Local wood is toxic when burned. The smoke alone would incapacitate most known species within minutes." "Yes, sir. Should I add that to the report under inexplicable phenomena or reasons to request hazard pay?" Theksin decided he needed a drink. Possibly several, but first he needed to figure out which poor soul had survived a crash that should have killed them, only to die slowly on a planet that objected to life on philosophical grounds. He pulled up the Perseverance 3's manifest: 300 colonists, 200 crew, all accounted for in the wreckage except, you have got to be kidding me, Marcus Webb, age 37. Occupation listed as agricultural engineer, which was fancy talk for professional dirt enthusiast. No notable skills beyond an apparent talent for coaxing plants to grow in places they shouldn't. Next of kin, none. Emergency contact. See me about that later. The file photo showed a man with an aggressively casual smile and the kind of face that suggested he'd once been told no and taken it as a personal challenge. Send a surveillance drone, Thexin ordered. Maximum range, minimum risk. I want eyes on whatever is down there. The drone launched at dawn, Kepler 442b local time, which meant the planet was only moderately trying to kill everything instead of aggressively trying to kill everything. It descended through cloud layers that would corrode civilian-grade hulls, past flying creatures that attacked it out of spite rather than hunger, and finally broke through to visual range. The crash site was exactly as horrific as predicted. The Perseverance 3 had carved a scar across the landscape 3 kilometers long, leaving debris scattered like breadcrumbs leading to a final resting place that could generously be called catastrophic. The main hull had compacted into something vaguely ship-shaped if you squinted and had a generous imagination. But next to the wreckage, someone had built a shelter. It wasn't fancy. Sheets of hull plating propped against salvage support beams, sealed with some kind of local plant resin that absolutely should not work as waterproofing, but apparently did. A crude, chimney-vented smoke, toxic, deadly smoke, into the atmosphere. Outside, someone had arranged rocks into what might charitably be called a fence, though what it was fencing out or in remained unclear. And there, sitting on a chunk of debris like he was enjoying a Sunday afternoon, was Marcus Webb. He was cooking something over a fire. Is that a stew? Ossic's voice cracked with disbelief. Thixin watched in silence as the human stirred a pot suspended over flames, occasionally tasting whatever culinary nightmare he'd concocted. The man was wearing what appeared to be shorts, and a shirt with the sleeves torn off. No environmental suit, no breathing apparatus, no visible signs of radiation poisoning, atmospheric toxicity, or the basic good sense that evolution should have provided. How long has it been since the crash? Thixin asked, though he knew the answer. 17 days, sir. 17 days. The human had been living on a Class 9 death world for 17 days and had somehow progressed from catastrophic survival scenario to camping trip with a slight apocalypse ambiance. Get me the xenobiology team, and the psychology department, and possibly a priest. By week 2 of observation, the situation had evolved from impossible to personally offensive to physics. Marcus Webb and the crew had taken to calling him the human, as if his species explained everything, which maybe it did, had expanded his operations considerably. The shelter now had 2 rooms. 2 rooms, one appeared to be living quarters, the other a workspace filled with salvaged equipment in various states of repair. He'd rigged a water filtration system using ship components and local materials that should have poisoned him, but somehow didn't. The fence had grown into a proper perimeter, reinforced with sharpened stakes that suggested he'd had unpleasant encounters with local wildlife. And then there was the garden. He's farming, Ossic reported, his voice somewhere between awe and hysteria. He's actually farming. The human had cleared a patch of ground near his shelter and planted seeds from the ship's agricultural stores. This alone violated 16 different biological contamination protocols, 3 ethical guidelines, and the basic assumption that nothing from off-world could survive in Kepler 442b's toxic soil. The plants were thriving. The Texan watched the drone footage of Marcus Webb tending his garden with the care of someone who had not received the memo about impossibility. The human watered his plants with filtered rainwater, reinforced young stalks with makeshift supports, and even appeared to be talking to them. Whether the plants appreciated the conversation was unclear, but they were growing, which was more than any galactic botanist had managed on this nightmare planet. He's also started construction on something, the surveillance officer added, highlighting a section of cleared ground where the human had laid out what looked like foundation markers. We think it might be an expansion to his shelter, or possibly a monument to human stubbornness. The survey team can't decide. There's a survey team? The Kexin felt a headache forming behind his primary eyes. Oh yes, sir, 3 ships in high orbit. The Biological Imperative Institute sent researchers. So did the University of Galactic Xenology. There's also a documentary crew from Crystal Star Entertainment, though they're maintaining they're here for unrelated reasons. This was getting out of hand. Month 2 brought developments that made the previous impossibilities look quaint. Marcus Webb had established what could only be described as a functioning homestead. His shelter had expanded into a legitimate structure with multiple rooms, a covered porch, and what appeared to be decorative elements because apparently, when stranded on a death world, humans still cared about aesthetics. The garden had matured into organized rows of earth crops growing alongside experimental plantings of local vegetation he'd apparently decided to domesticate through sheer force of will. He'd built a smokehouse for preserving meat from the local fauna, which he hunted with weapons cobbled together from ship parts and native materials. The fact that he was eating creatures whose biology the Galactic Survey Commission had classified as aggressively toxic to carbon-based life went unremarked because at this point, what was one more impossibility? He'd even started building furniture. "That's a chair," the Kexin said flatly, watching the latest drone footage. "He made a chair." "Yes, sir. From local wood, which is toxic. He's sitting in it." "Yes, sir. He appears comfortable." The commander made a note to request a psychiatric evaluation for himself, not the human. The human was clearly fine, thriving even, on a planet that should have killed him 17 times over by now. The human was the one questioning reality. The breaking point came when Marcus Webb installed a wind turbine, using salvaged ship components, scavenged materials, and what the engineering team described as inspired lunacy. The human had constructed a functioning power generation system. It was crude, inefficient, and violated so many engineering principles that one analyst had submitted a formal complaint to the laws of physics. But it worked. The human now had electricity. He used it to power lights and a radio transmitter. The first message was brief. "This is Marcus Webb of the colony ship Perseverance 3, transmitting from Kepler 442b. I'm alive, relatively healthy, and in possession of approximately 3/4 of my original sanity. If anyone's receiving this, I'd appreciate a pickup whenever convenient. Bring beer and antibiotics, and possibly a therapist." Webb out. The message hit Galactic Survey Commission channels like a grenade at a garden party. The human found himself in an emergency meeting with representatives from 14 different organizations, all arguing about protocol, responsibility, and the fundamental question of what to do about a human who had turned a Class 9 death world into a viable homestead through nothing but spite and agricultural knowledge. "We should mount a rescue operation immediately," insisted Coordinator Velix of the Humanitarian Aid Collective, his translator struggling to convey his species' unique combination of concern and bafflement. "We should study him extensively first," countered Dr. Mishara from the Xenobiology Institute. "This represents an unprecedented opportunity to understand human adaptability. We should update our planetary classification system," added a bureaucrat, whose name Thexin had already forgotten. If a single human can survive on a Class 9, our entire rating methodology might be fundamentally flawed. The Schumann rubbed his temples. Let's start with something simple. Let's actually talk to him. The landing craft descended 3 days later, equipped with enough hazard shielding to survive a solar flare and crewed by volunteers who'd updated their wills before departure. The delegation consisted of Thexin, 2 xenobiologists, a cultural liaison, and a medical officer who'd brought enough emergency medications to treat a small army. They landed 50 meters from Marcus Webb's homestead, their environmental suits indicating lethal atmospheric toxicity, dangerous radiation levels, and hostile biological threats in a cheerful red display that suggested imminent death. Marcus Webb walked out to meet them wearing shorts, a sleeveless shirt, and a hat he'd apparently woven from local grasses. He was also holding a cup of something steaming. "Hey there," he called out. His voice transmitted through their suit comms with alarming clarity. "You folks want some tea? I've been experimenting with local plants. Pretty sure this one won't kill you." "Well, reasonably sure. 60-40 odds, maybe?" The medical officer made a sound like a dying engine. Thexin activated his external speakers. "Mr. Webb, we're here to... Are you drinking that?" Marcus took a deliberately long sip. "This? Yeah, it's pretty good. Bit bitter, but you get used to it. Helps with digestion after eating the local lizard things. They're gamey. The local wildlife is classified as extremely toxic to human biology." "Ha! Also, I think my stomach acid might have adapted. Or I'm slowly poisoning myself and just don't know it yet. Either way, I feel fine." The cultural liaison leaned toward Thexin and whispered, "Is this normal for humans? I'm increasingly convinced nothing is normal for humans." The tour of Marcus Webb's settlement took 2 hours and challenged everything the delegation thought they knew about survival biology. The human had created not just a shelter but a home, complete with organized storage, a workshop area, sleeping quarters with an actual bed frame, and a kitchen that would have looked at home in any frontier settlement in the galaxy. He'd mapped the local area, identified edible and useful plants, established hunting grounds, and even started what he called long-term projects, which included plans for expanded agriculture and a rainwater collection system. On a planet classified as uninhabitable, he was planning for the future. "How?" Dr. Mishara finally asked, her scientific composure cracking. "How is any of this possible?" Marcus shrugged, leaning against his homemade porch railing. "Honestly, I just started with the basics. Shelter, water, food. Everything else kind of followed. Yeah, the atmosphere's rough and the wildlife's aggressive, but it's not that different from camping in Australia. Or Detroit. Your planet has regions as hostile as a Class 9 death world. We call them cities. They have their own challenges." The Keynes pulled up the planetary classification data on his wrist display. "Mr. Webb, do you understand that according to every model we have, you should be dead? Multiple times over?" "Yeah. I saw the crashed probe with the Survey Commission logo. Figured you guys had written this place off." Marcus took another sip of his possibly toxic tea. "Thing is, humans are pretty good at surviving in places that don't want us. It's kind of our specialty. We evolved on a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill us with everything from weather to wildlife. We're stubborn. Also, agricultural engineers learn to work with what we've got, and I had a whole crashed spaceship of materials. But the atmospheric toxins built up tolerance, probably. Or I'm just lucky. Haven't decided which. The radiation levels. I sleep underground. Noticed pretty quick that the hull plating blocks most of it. The local predators, We came to an understanding. I built a fence. They mostly stay on their side. The ones that didn't respect boundaries became stew. The medical officer was scanning Marcus with increasingly frantic movements. His baseline physiology is completely normal for a human. No mutations, no radiation damage, no toxin accumulation. It's as if he's living on a Class 2 garden world. To be fair, Marcus said, I do feel like I've been in a bar fight with a planet for 2 months. But you adapt, you know. Before they left, the Keens asked the question that had been bothering him since the first surveillance footage. Mr. Webb, why did you build all this? You could have simply survived on ship rations until rescue arrived. Marcus looked out over his garden, his expanded shelter, the wind turbine spinning in the toxic breeze. His expression was thoughtful, almost peaceful. Because surviving isn't living, he said simply. And because someone told me nothing could survive here, which, you know, felt like a challenge. 6 months after the crash, the rescue ship Compassionate Endeavour arrived in orbit around Kepler 442b. The crew expected to find either a corpse or a traumatized survivor barely clinging to life. They found Marcus Webb submitting formal paperwork to have the planet reclassified. His settlement had grown into what could generously be called a compound and accurately be called a small village. Multiple structures, extensive agriculture, a functioning power grid, and a water purification system that the ship's engineers admitted was crude but effective. He'd cleared paths, built a dock for the shuttle landing, and installed a sign that read Webb's Landing Population 1 and Holding. He'd also named everything. The nearby stream was Perseverance Creek. The mountain range was the Persistence Peaks. The valley containing his settlement was called, with either optimism or sarcasm, Paradise Valley. Mr. Webb, the rescue captain, said carefully, "You're aware you can leave now. We're here to take you home." Marcus looked around his settlement, at the garden coming into its 3rd planting cycle, at the structures he'd built, at the planet that had tried to kill him and failed. He'd spent 6 months turning impossibility into routine, and somewhere along the way, this death world had become his. "I'll come back to civilization for a bit," he said. "Need to file some claims, submit my reclassification data, pick up better tools. But I'm coming back. This place has potential." The captain blinked. "You're colonizing a Class 9 death world. Voluntarily. Someone's got to be first. Might as well be me." As the rescue ship departed with one very relaxed human and one very thick folder of reclassification paperwork, Commander Thexan sat in his office reviewing the final reports. Marcus Webb had survived 184 days on Kepler 442b, established a permanent settlement, and fundamentally challenged everything the Galactic Survey Commission thought it knew about planetary habitability. The human had also submitted a formal complaint about the overly dramatic classification system, suggesting that Class-9 Uninhabitable should be changed to Class-9 Challenging, or possibly Class-9 Not Recommended for Beginners. The SIN filed the report, updated the planetary database, and made a note to himself, "When humans tell you they're going to do something impossible, believe them, and then get out of their way." Because in a galaxy full of species that carefully calculated risks and respected limitations, humans had one particular talent that defied all logic. They simply refused to accept that no was a final answer. Somewhere in the Cygnus constellation, on a planet that wasn't supposed to support life, a garden was growing, and a human was probably building something new just to prove it could be done. The universe, for its part, had learned a valuable lesson: never bet against a species that considers spite a survival strategy.